afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Sci Fi 1979, where we're going to talk about some great films and TV shows and anime from the year 1979. I have a wonderful group panel here. I'll go ahead and let you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about something about yourself and all that fun stuff.
Hi, I'm Sean Mullen, and I'm the founder of the Science Fiction Coalition, and I'm a big science fiction fan. And I thought 1979 was a very important year of science fiction, because Star Wars came out in '77, and Hollywood scrambled around for science fiction. So we're going to talk about 40 years ago of science fiction movies and television.
There you go.
A little lighter this way. Hi everyone, I'm Todd Felton, and excited to talk about some 1979 science fiction today. I do some costuming, been a big sci-fi fan for many years, and glad to present some great information to you today.
Hello, I'm David Newhasel. I'm a member of the 501st and the Sci Fi Coalition. I'm here to talk to you about a couple of TV shows that came out in 1979.
And as the token Asian and female on the panel, I'm Jessica Secco Downing. I'll be talking about anime and Saturday morning cartoons. I'm a member of the Rebel Legion and the Sci-Fi Coalition, and when I'm not at USD doing my thing there, I am a writer as well.
All right, thank you guys. 1979, as Sean kind of pointed out, Hollywood was scrambling to kind of throw together as many, I guess, sci-fi films that they possibly could after Star Wars, a big hit and boom with that. Sean, why don't you tell us a little bit about, Alien and why was that so important in 1979?
So, Alien was actually, it had a different title. So they wrote the story in the mid-'70s, and the original title was called Star Beast. And it was almost picked up by Roger Corman, that if you're familiar with some of his work, but the rights got bought out by Brandywine Productions, which was affiliated to 20th Century Fox. So that's how 20th Century Fox got the rights for Alien. And the story was originally to be a B movie, and it just, they put it on the back shelf. And then, of course, as we know, 20th Century Fox did Star Wars in '77, and it was a big surprise to everybody that science fiction can actually make money. And so they already had the script. They said, hey, let's put some money in this, because originally it was going to be like a $10 million project. And so they put it up to $41 million on the budget to make it a really serious science fiction film. And but they weren't happy with the name of the title, because that sounded like a B movie, Star Beast. And so the writer, in the story kept on saying the alien was in the room, the alien was in the rafters or whatever. And they said, hey, we'll just call it Alien. And it sounded right. And so Alien got the green light, and they put in more money in it, and they got really decent actors that were another, like Tom Skerritt. Sigourney Weaver, that was her first film, but she was a Broadway actress. And so they got some recognizable character actors to be in the movie. And so we all know that H.R. Geiger was the artist that they based the Alien from, but actually his work almost got used in another movie, and that was Doom. They were they were trying to do Dune. Dune, as we know, came out like in '84, but they wanted it like in the late '70s, but they just couldn't get the production going. So the designs of Alien was actually going to be used in Dune, that style. And he wouldn't have been available for Alien. So Alien could have been a totally different design movie. But Dune fell through, so H.R. Geiger, because most of his art was already made. So they used Alien based on his works instead of Dune. So Alien could have been a really different movie. So H.R. Geiger, they used his work. And so they had the problem with who's going to be the alien, because they didn't want to look like a man in a gorilla suit. They actually they tried out Peter Mayhew. Actually, Peter Mayhew was 7'2", but he didn't really do well with the movements because they wanted to. They don't want to make it obvious it was a person in a suit. They found this gentleman named Bolaji Badejo, who's from Nigeria, and they found him at a pub in London. And he studied mime and Tai Chi, and they really liked his sleek movement and his slow, like Tai Chi movement. So he accidentally became the alien. And they had two other stuntmen that did Alien. Eddie Powell, he was the dangling alien, on the chains that ended. What's his name? The guy that was looking for the cat. So he was the stuntman for that, and the other stuntman was Roy Scammell, and he was the alien that was in the escape pod in the end that got shot out in space. So those were the three actors that played Alien. And Alien came out on May 25th, 1979. So May 25th sounds familiar because in May 25th, 1977 was Star Wars. So exactly 2 years later, Alien came out, and it was only in 91 theaters at opening day, and it ended up in mid-July to be in 780 theaters, because like Star Wars, when Star Wars came out in 1977, it was only in 32 theaters, and then in mid-July, Star Wars, it spread like wildfire, went into 1,000 theaters, so very similar with Alien. And well, it ended up making 300 million.
So why, like with Star Wars, when it first premieres, after the success of Star Wars, why would 20th Century Fox take another kind of big budget film for sci-fi and only open it in such a small amount and then increase it later?
Well, it all depends on the movie theaters. 20th Century will, make a pitch for the movie, and it's all depending on how many theaters sign up to have the film. So like Star Wars, there was only 32 theaters. And Alien, it was 91. Still not a lot, but theaters were like, well, let's take a shot on this. But it was still something new, a sci-fi horror movie. It was something new at that time.
Right. So basically, even though the success of Star Wars, theaters are still kind of on the fence of something sci-fi and horror.
Yeah, because we're still in the pioneer days of high quality science fiction films in Hollywood. One other thing I would like to say is I studied on this. They used 4 cats to play Jones. So they had a cat for holding, a cat for scampering, a cat for hissing, and a cat that laid around and sat. So, and on noting the hissing Jones, they had problems having him hiss because, you know, cats don't do what you want them to do. So what they did is they got a German Shepherd and they lifted a screen that made the cat react to that.
Interesting. So with Alien, so Star Wars also saw success with a huge toy line, right? What kind of merchandise did Aliens have in 1979 to help kind of?
Yeah, not much. So they did do a 12-inch figure, and actually they took it off the shelves because it was very controversial to have toys made from a rated R film. So Alien was the first rated R film to have toys. They did bubblegum cards. And they did some puzzles. Now there are some items that was done by Alien, and they're very sought after. Did you ever? Yeah, there's some of the things that were available, but it was very controversial at the time to have a rated R movie making toys for kids. And they're very sought after now from collectors.
I like how in this one the alien's got his hands up like he's being arrested, like, don't shoot! Very interesting.
Yeah, so I personally saw Alien, I was 9 years old, and it scared me, but I loved it.
Nice.
I just want to say another thing that they kept, like the promotions, they kept Alien a secret until after. They didn't reveal what he looked like. He was not in the trailers. He was not in any promo.
Wasn't in the trailer? You got the trailer, right? Let's see
I got
the
the trailer you want to play?
Yeah, let's see the
Yeah, we've been having some Wi-Fi problems, but we'll show the original trailer of Alien. Oh, and I think for sound you need this.
I think we could do it.
Okay.
I'm trying to put the speaker on there so it's any better. Yeah, sound, yeah. I'll just do that. It doesn't reach.
Okay. They used a hen's egg.
Yeah, because that looks something like an egg from a hen.
Somebody mind grabbing maybe one of the lights? There we go, thank you. Nope, the other one. There we go.
That one's best.
They did briefly show the face hugger, but the alien itself. Who has never seen the original trailer? Okay. Yeah, I remember seeing it as a kid. I was so intrigued. So they did a good job in not revealing much.
Yeah, they did. Just the music is
Yeah.
Yeah.
eerie in its own.
So I'm good
Yeah,
on
the
it.
trailer.
Okay,
Pretty
cool.
good, actually. The other slides, I really didn't show.
Oh,
anything
you never showed them. Go ahead and
because-
run them through real quick.
Okay, yeah, just go ahead and
Yeah,
describe them. And
since I worked so hard in getting them.
So it looks like we got the cast.
just run a reset. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
Who
One thing I thought,
saw?
wasn't this one of Ridley Scott's first films as well?
Yeah, it was his second one. His first one was The Duelist.
Right.
And this was his second film.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a huge undertaking, just getting something just thrown at you after doing your first film, something this big on that big of a level.
And that's
Nigerian guy?
yeah.
I mean, could you imagine just being a director that's basically still wet behind the ears, and your sophomore film is a $41 million budgeted sci-fi thriller? Like, that is like,
George Lucas.
yeah, George, I mean, he did American Graffiti and then did Star Wars, you know? So,
And he did get some heat from the cast, Tom Skerritt and Yaphet Kotto that played Parker. They were saying he was taking too long on certain scenes, but he wanted to capture the drama, and
right.
so he did get some heat on the cast on the film.
Oh, so it wasn't like George going quicker, faster, louder.
Right.
Okay. So, all right, so another inspirational film in 1979 came along and really wowed audiences, and it actually started off as a TV show in the 60s. Todd, you want to talk about Star Trek, the motion picture?
Definitely. I think I'm actually going to move over there though, because I've got some notes actually on the PowerPoint. So.
Sure. Okay.
Do you have it up for?
Yeah, I'll just bring it to you, yeah.
No, we're just doing it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Yes, Star Trek: The Motion Picture. All right. So it came out in December of 1979.
This is the trails. But we can go skip on. Next. Yeah, that's yours.
There we go. December 6, 1979. So at this point, the TV show had been off the air for 10 years. And it was a long road in order to get the movie made. And of course, there had really never been a TV show that was resurrected into a motion picture. So it was hugely influential for 1979. So here's kind of a history of where Star Trek was and how they got here. You can see it was 64 when they filmed the first pilot. 65 they did the second pilot. 66 is when the show actually started. 69, then that's when they aired the final episode. But it went on to syndication, and that's where it grew hugely popular. It was finally able to be seen by more people. It was like 6 o'clock in syndication in most cases. And so that's when just, it was college students and families, they were actually able to see it. And so then Star Trek became hugely popular. After 3 seasons, it was canceled. Syndication, though, it's still in syndication today. But September 73, they did come out with Star Trek, the animated series. Now, it lasted 2 seasons, I think it was about 26 episodes. There it is, 22 episodes. And then it was gone in October of 74. But they started on something else. They started a lot of things. You can see, 75, they said, okay, movie script, commission, great. 76, no, it's going to be a TV show. In April that same year, okay, it's going to be a movie. Then, no, it's going to be a movie, Planet of the Titans. And then, no, we're not going to make Planet of the Titans. Instead, we're going to make this new television service called Paramount Television Service. And Star Trek Phase 2 is going to lead it. This is in only 2 years, it went back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. They just couldn't figure out how exactly the best way to resurrect Star Trek the motion picture.
So why do you think that was?
It's a lot of reasons. They wanted to do a TV show, right? And then it's like, see, it was what, 1976, they said, let's do a movie, right? But the first script came back, Planet of the Titans, and they weren't thrilled with it. So like, okay, well, let's not do that. The funny thing is that when they did decide to go back to making a TV show, you see it was 6/10/77.
Right, I was just gonna say, or what Star Wars influenced them to go back and be like, now that we got this huge sci-fi hit, are we gonna?
Well, the big thing is that Paramount wanted to do their own network.
Mhm.
right? They saw that they would be able to go put, get their own show out there, their own network, and get a lot more revenue that way. And they thought that was going to be the thing. They also didn't think that the movie industry could sustain that many science fiction movies, right? Just, okay, well, there's already Close Encounters that's happening. We already had Star Wars. Is the public really going to be able to support all of these different science fiction films? No, let's go back, let's do a TV show. So, Star Trek Phase 2 starts production. And just a few months later, it is then canceled. They have gotten the sets made. They have gotten costume tests. They have gotten all these things done. And then they find out their show isn't going to happen at all. But it's okay. It's going to be a movie. So, yes, finally, they have just say Star Trek Phase 2 was canceled in November, but the following March, 78, they said, okay, we are making a movie. No, really this time, we really are. And so they've renegotiated the contracts and started over. They had to get a new director, new composer, they had to renegotiate with all the cast. So they also hired Robert Wise to direct. And this was huge because he had made some huge sci-fi movies already. He was known for The Day the Earth Stood Still and Andromeda Strain. So in the sci-fi realm, he was really well known. He had also directed like West Side Story and The Sound of Music. So I was thrilled to get such a big name director attached to the film. They held the largest press conference ever at Paramount Pictures since like the 1950s to announce this movie, to really gain the public's trust and say that yes, this movie is really happening. We know that there's been a lot of years, a lot of back and forth. No, we're really doing it this time. But it was a very troubled production. They started filming in August of 78. They didn't even have a completed script. They had a deadline. They had to get the movie out by December 79. There are all these contracts written, financial penalties. They just had to start filming. So there was no script. And then you see in January 79, that's when they completed principal photography. 3 months overdue, which means lots of spending. But they were going to have almost a year to do all the special effects, from January 79 till December. Seems like lots of time, right? We've got like 11 months. But it's 1979, and there were issues. Phase 2, the special effects creator, Able and Associates, they did not have the capability of really doing the effects for a motion picture. That wormhole effect, that's about the only thing that remains in the film from that first visual effects company. They ended up, say in February, after huge budget overruns and not really getting anything worth saving from this effects studio, and to meet their deadline, Paramount just said, nope, we got to pull out the rug here and start over. The effects were then done by Douglas Trumbull, who is really well known in the effects industry at the time. 2001: Space Odyssey, Close Encounters, Blade Runner. Paramount had actually gone to him first, and he said, no thanks, I'm busy with other things, I'm not interested. So that's why he was involved. They ended up pulling him back in and just to make their deadline. But you can see they spent like $5 to $10 million already with Able and Associates, which was just unusable. And then it's going to cost another $10 million for the redone effects, just to get those done. So that budget is starting to balloon. All right, here we are. It's December, and they made it. It was hard. It was difficult. So much that they were running negatives, out at the lab. And they lined up all these cans. These are all the movie film cans. Because remember, this is the time where you are actually running film. And you got to have it done by the lab, put in these, and have them all shipped out to the movie theaters. In order to get all these done on time, they used a sound stage in order to lay all this out, so that way they could just get the reels from the lab, get them in, and get them out to the theater. it was so tight. Robert Wise had to take the one for the premiere in Washington, D.C., had to take it directly with him on the plane so he could actually preview it in Washington in December of '79. So the budget ballooned from 15 million originally to 46 million, which at the time was the most expensive film ever made. And largely because of the overruns, the length of time, the effects. But it was so highly regarded, like so anticipated. It made the box office record, highest weekend gross ever with 11.8 million. Sorry, that wasn't ever, that was for the year, 1979. It was the 5th highest overall for the year, with 82 million. When you brought in the foreign income, the video rental sales, and licensing, it actually ended up making quite a bit of money. The McDonald's Star Trek meal, the Happy Meal, this is the first time McDonald's had a themed Happy Meal. It was for Star Trek the Motion Picture. So much like Alien, there wasn't a lot of licensing that. Star Trek the Motion Picture actually had a lot, because they had a lot riding on this. If they didn't make the deadline of getting the film to theaters, it would have been a huge penalty. I think it was about $30 million that they would have had to pay to the theater owners, and damages of another $30 million. So that's why they had to push and get these effects done. But the visuals were worth it. These were just amazing, amazing effects. The Klingon battle at the beginning, was not like nothing we had ever seen from Star Trek. There were gorgeous visuals and lots of reactions to those visuals. Remember, the effects weren't done when they were filming. They didn't really know what they were looking at. So that's why there's so much in the movie of them. Oh, that's an interesting thing. Oh, look. Wow. That's what so much was filmed. They really didn't know how it was going to look. So Star Trek the Motion Picture was groundbreaking, especially for Star Trek, because the redesigns was just gorgeous for the big screen. They really did a great job. And under those constraints, who would have thought they would be able to actually succeed so well? There's the new warp effect. Enterprise in dry dock. Who has not seen Star Trek the Motion Picture? Like, everybody has seen it? All right, so we're aware of this scene, right? Play a little bit of it here. Oops. Yeah. Thank you. There's that gorgeous music, right? Jerry Goldsmith. Now, I'm only going to play a little bit of this because, for those that remember, it takes a little while. Everything in the movie was slow, right? That whole trip around the ship and everything is actually almost 6 minutes long. Here's more of those gorgeous visuals. And then more of the Enterprise there, just beautiful. So I think the biggest takeaways from this movie is, although it is slow and it is plodding, it was so highly anticipated that they really succeeded well with what they did produce on screen, enough that they were able to make a sequel, 3 years later. A much more budget efficient sequel. that the human adventure is just beginning. Well, and the Star Trek film franchise. Because it did really create everything that we have now. Like, if it wasn't for Star Trek the Motion Picture, we wouldn't have had the film series. We wouldn't have had the spin-off series. Star Trek may not exist today if it wasn't for Star Trek the Motion Picture. So even though it is known as such a boring film, it is beautiful, and without it, we wouldn't have everything that's come since. So I'm thankful for Star Trek the Motion Picture, even though I rarely watch it, without falling asleep. But I'm thankful for Star Trek the Motion Picture. I hope you guys are too.
Thank you, Todd. All right, now we're going to jump into quite possibly one of probably my all-time favorite TV show. I remember seeing it and falling in love with it. I owned all the toys, the models, the board game. Yeah, so we're going to hand it over to David. He's going to talk about Buck Rogers.
Okay, so far what we've covered is basically movies that have come out in the theaters. But TV obviously wanted to get in on the action as well. So what it decided to do is go back. It's like, okay, what can we recreate here? And sure enough, somebody came up with the idea, let's do Buck Rogers. So they got together. They've cast Gil Gerard, and they also cast Aaron Gray, which you may know from another TV show, Silver Spoons. And it was a financially viable the sci-fi show, and it was really well done. I don't think that you could see it there, but there was also a robot named Tweaky. Oh yeah, there he is, and he beady. I never really understood what that was about, but it was played by Felix Celia, and the whole series was just so popular at the time. So you probably see that little thing around Tweaky's neck. And that is actually another artificial intelligence that sort of like was a problem solver on the show. Does anybody remember the name of that?
Dr. Theopolis.
Theopolis, yes, that is it. Had a very interesting characterization on the show as well. It was a robot that had real character to it. But yeah, I remember watching the show consistently, and I just remember all kids going around going beady, 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 beady. It was a very endearing thing for Tweaky. As far as like the premise of the show, it was basically every show had its own little plot point, something different all the time. I remember that after a few seasons, it kind of like moved on to a different style where Buck Rogers and all the characters got on this explorer ship, much like today. You probably remember Star Trek Voyager. It would go from planet to planet, and sort of like a Star Trek deal where they were out to explore new planets and thing. And one of the characters was started off with that season was Hawkman. It was basically a half man, half bird hybrid that lost his mate in the season opener. And he blamed Buck for that, but eventually they became friends, and he joined the crew on the Explorer ship.
Spoiler, I'm still watching it.
Well, let's see, you've only had about 40 years to watch it, if you don't know it by now. But it was still a good show. And one of the things, even my mom liked it because she had a thing for the Hawkman. That's one of the weirdest things I probably remember my mom for. So.
My mom was completely opposite. She loved Buck, so.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, but Buck Rogers, Gil Gerard played was perfect for the role because he was really sort of a ladies' man at the time. He's almost unrecognizable now. He's had a lot of issues since playing, but that's what he's mainly known for. And I do believe that Erin Gray does do conventions.
Yep.
I remember that she does sign autographs. So I don't know if she still does that. I know that she's done it quite a few times in the past.
Yeah, Buck Rogers was definitely a great show back in the day. I mean, how many seasons was it? Like
Yeah, I
four
think.
or five, something like that?
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5.
Two? It was two?
Is it 2? So they must have really.
That was a lot of episodes.
There was a lot of episodes then, because
TV was a lot of episodes originally, you know,
Yeah.
about 26
Yeah.
episodes a year.
Yeah. Yeah, not like now where it's
So
10
the second
episodes.
season.
If you go back to the prior photo that you had of Buck, he's standing with another person in a uniform.
Mhm.
Buster Crab.
It's Buster Crabbe playing General Gordon, Flash Gordon.
Who is Buster Crabbe?
He was Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
he also did the older Buck Rogers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I dug up those pictures.
Yeah.
So Flash Gordon, like what, the 50s cereals?
The old serials, yeah.
Yeah.
With the sparklers in the back of the rocket.
Yeah.
I remember those. Oh my gosh. All right. Sorry.
Okay.
I just got caught in the Buck. I love
No, it was a great TV show.
That was
I
my show
mean,
growing
kids who like science fiction, they would flock to shows like this on
Yeah.
TV.
up. Yeah, I would.
It was kid friendly and it was
If
a
I
great.
remember correctly, the pilot was almost 2 hours long. It was like
It
an
was
hour and a
originally-
Yeah.
half, something like that. It was like a full-length film, and like it was amazing. Especially just, I mean, for myself when I saw it, it wasn't in '79 because I was only 3. It was probably 81, 82. Around when I was 5 or 6, and it was in syndication, and
They
it
originally
just-
showed it in the theater
Okay.
because Battlestar Galactica was still on TV.
Yep.
That is the theatrical trailer.
Would you like to see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see it.
Let's see that.
Or it's the beginning.
It's still very watchable today, by the way.
Yes. He said 1987.
I think that was the beginning of the shuttle era
Yeah,
too.
that's the TV one.
Yeah.
Did Fonzie freak this out?
The music is so.
That is the theatrical beginning.
Yep. It's very, very 1970s. Probably one of the longest intros to a show or movie ever. Like they really got their money's worth with the song.
Is it really? I've been watching the show recently. Yeah, they don't show any of this. So,
It was just on the pilot,
yeah.
the 2-hour pilot.
That's why you watched it.
I was gonna.
I thought this is kind of like James Bondish
Oh,
beginning,
yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
The show holds up better than the trailer.
Aaron's character was,
This is Why couldn't Star Trek do something like this, man? With
Yeah.
the green aliens?
I just put her to sleeping while she does this all. Oh,
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I wanna watch this show.
Bucks of Playboy.
Also, the voice of Twiki was done by,
No, wasn't
Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny.
No.
You can hear some like Yosemite Sam into it.
I've never
With the
seen the show.
Yeah.
I wanna see it.
Wow.
Yeah.
The original Cosby.
The show is much better than the opening.
now this is the opening for every single episode?
No, this is just the pilot.
Oh, okay.
So, like, I'm telling you, it is literally the longest introduction to
Yeah,
TV
that was like-
ever.
I'm
The
assuming
concept-
they were guessing like the demographic was single men.
Apparently.
Teenage boys.
Single women.
The concept is he's dreaming while he's
The
sleeping.
same demographic.
Well, there's just a time. Should we move on?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our animated.
Now you see where it says written by Glenn A. Larson. Glenn A. Larson was a very prominent person in the late 70s, early 80s. Not only did he wrote Buck Rogers there, as you saw, but he also created another sci-fi show. And that show is called Battlestar Galactica. Now, probably the younger audience probably remembers Battlestar Galactica, the new version, but I grew up with watching Battlestar Galactica in the 1970s, and I thought that it was an awesome TV show because it had all the special effects that Star Wars had. It had fights, it had bad guys, and it had a real human story to it too. And there you see the Cylons, which is the antagonist of the human race. It basically starts off with a movie with a 2-hour pilot episode where the Cylons obliterate all of mankind, and whoever's left gathers together whatever ships they can find, and led by the only remaining Battlestar or battleship that they had at the time. And there you see the Battlestar Galactica. That is the ship in the middle. Cylon base ship near the top. It had all the features that you wanted from the Star Wars show. But what really but the thing of it is that I really never looked at it as a rip-off of Star Wars. Some people did, but I thought the story was very original. I thought all the ships were original, and the story was original too. So basically, the show was basically, they decided what are they going to do? Well, they know about this colony of humans where they originated from, and that was called Earth. And so that's what they did. They set out to seek out Earth. All the time they were pursued by the Cylons, because the Cylons wanted them all obliterated. So
Yeah, one of the things that I loved about this show is it seemed like a lot of the design of the ships and stuff like that were taken from Japanese anime at the time.
yeah,
Even looking at it now, it almost looks like, I know it didn't come out around the same time, but the Macross Saga like the style of the ships, even the storyline is, you know, kind of very, very close to, but yeah,
Now,
just
there
I
you
love
see-
how it was just kind of, just looks like something that you would see in a Japanese anime or something off the pages of a manga or something like that, just come onto it, you know, it's
Yeah.
really, really drawing.
Now, there you see basically the main characters. You'll notice that you have Adama as the captain of the Battlestar Galactica. You'll also recognize Dirk Benedict. He went on, after Battlestar Galactica was basically canceled, he went on to be face of the A-Team. And then there's Richard Hatch, who played Apollo, Adama's son, and he was a con favorite. He would be at Comic-Con every time until his passing. But you can still find Herbert Jefferson there as Boomer, because he still frequents conventions as well. Another thing about Battlestar Galactica that it had, like Star Wars had, was its score. The score was just beautiful. Just like Star Wars had brought the movie alive, well, it had a score too, and that was another thing that it had. So.
Can you sing us some of it?
Everybody!
Good job.
So, thank you. So what happened to Battlestar Galactica? It had a lot of episodes, just like Buck Rogers did for a season. But the production is rumored to be about $1 million per episode. And that was pretty expensive back in those days, especially for a TV show. But the producers didn't realize that they already spent all the money for the sets, the costumes, the special effects. They reused the one scene where lasers are being fired at a Cylon Raider and it blows up, and you can basically see that same scene in every single episode when they're doing a fight. But the producers just thought that it was just not going to happen. And even though that it was very popular at a time, they decided to just cut the plug. Or just take out the plug on it. And a lot of people were very upset about it at the time. So.
Very Star Wars-esque.
Yeah, it is very Star Wars-esque. But that was the whole point of Battlestar Galactica. That's why it was created. And you probably noticed there was a little kid there named Foxy. He lost his dog in the pilot, and it was replaced by a mechanical dog. Also, but they would call it a Daggett or whatever. But that's what they would call it. And they were just prominent characters just as much as everybody else was. Also, one of the most interesting things about Battlestar Galactica is that before every episode was aired, a message was put on the TV screen that says that the government has no information or does not have any information on aliens trying to reach Earth. And that was just one of the weird trivia things about that nobody knows why that was there, or what the government was trying to cover up, or what was going on with that. But after it was canceled, a lot of people wanted it back, so they brought it back and called it Battlestar Galactica 1980, and it was a complete disaster. There was just the writing was atrocious. It's basically where they did find Earth, and but they were having trouble trying to integrate themselves or trying to approach the human race, and they just really didn't know how to do it. And they just did all these weird things like kidnap a DJ called Wolfman Jack at the time, and it was just weird.
Did they use the original cast for that?
Most of them, yeah. I don't think Dirk Benedict returned. He did return for one episode, I know, because I had it on videotape. His ship got his Colonial Viper got damaged in a fight, and he couldn't keep up with the fleet. So the story goes, and he landed on this desert world where he found some Cylons, and he took bits and parts of it and put it together because he was so lonely. He basically got a functioning Cylon to
From what I
work.
vaguely remember that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I do remember it because it was Starbuck and Sci, and it was a really good episode as far as character goes. But the story had so many plot holes in it. It's like, and I don't even know where to go to describe it. Anyway, it was a disaster. Everybody lost interest, and it was pretty much doomed. But it still stands up even today, standard, and it remains one of my more favorite sci-fi shows.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, we're going to move along, keep moving. We're running out of time shortly here, but I'm going to move down to Jessica and let her talk about Battle of the Planets.
Science
One of my
Ninja Team Gatchaman.
cartoons. Oh my gosh.
Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, or Battle of the Planets, G-Force, was one of the first forays for most Americans into Japanese animation. I remember running home from elementary school and turning on CBS at 3:30 and just sitting down and watching it, and the score would come out and you're like, I love this show. And we're like, again, it was the first time people really saw Japanese animation that was accessible to us. And what we didn't know at the time as kids was that this was actually more adult show. It was, the adaptation was very faithful to the origin, but there was profanity, there was nudity, excessive violence, there was transgender characters, and that's not going to fly, especially not in 1979. It barely flies now. There was a Star Wars connection. It was when it was purchased by Sandy Frank Productions. They renamed it Battle of the Planets. Gee, does that sound like something that, yeah. And if you look at the characters, they are also parallels to the Star Wars universe. Since they brought it here, there's been several other adaptations, but most people remember the original G-Force and Battle of the Planets. Can I get the next slide, please? Thank you. Mark is the first person you meet. He is the leader of the crew. He is a pilot whose father disappeared under mysterious circumstances. He's the ideal role model. He's calmer. He uses a birdarang, and the trivia on this one is, if you look at his the birdarang, the weapon he uses, it's also referenced in Batman Beyond. If you look at what Batman uses, what Terry uses in Batman Beyond, it's the design is almost the same. And same with Teen Titans. Robin's birdarang, same thing. It's because the people that did the character design, the gentleman that did it, was a very big fan of older animation, and that's where he got the character designs from. But gee, pilot, leader, parent that was disappearing under some mysterious circumstances sounds like some farm boy we know. Next slide, please. Then there's Jason. He's the bad boy. He was second in command. He gets along with Mark, but he really wants to be in charge. He's a race car driver. He's an orphan. Don't really know his backstory very much. And in the original Japanese, his parents were actually residents of the alien galaxy that wants to take over the Earth, but they were killed when he was the only one that escaped. But let's see. Bad boy can fly, race car driver. Gee, I wonder who that could be. Maybe a smuggler we know? Next slide, please. Next is Princess. Gee, I wonder who that is. She was modeled after a very famous Japanese actress, Yuko Inatsu. Her last name is never given in either one of them. They finally came up with one, and I can tell you, I don't remember what it is. She was raised in an orphanage. She rode a motorcycle. She was an engineer, which was unusual for depicting women, especially in animation and cartoons then, because women were seen as very reactive, very emotional. It was unusual to see a female character in a cartoon that actually had it together. And this was one of the first ones you saw. She also used yo-yos as a weapon, which I really loved. And let's see, she and Mark were a couple in the US States version. In Japan, he didn't want anything to do with her, and she was really mad about it. Next slide, please. Kia is, he was originally named Junpei in the Japanese, raised in the same orphanage as Jun, so Jun sees him as a younger brother, yes? Oh, okay. In the adaptation, he uses clicks and words and punctuating speech, and a lot of people thought it was because in the original translation that he used a lot of profanity, and when in fact it was not true. He was actually very soft-spoken in the original animation. He is also seen here. He was the clicks and words were explained away by saying he was a genetically engineered life form that June was with. And okay, next slide, please. And then finally, Tiny, son of the fisherman. He's the main pilot of the Phoenix, which was the planet, which was the ship. Sounds like Chewie. And he was basically seen as the comic relief. Next slide, please. Zoltar was the evil big bad. He was the field commander for Spectra, Galacto in the original. And he was originally a hermaphrodite. This is one of the biggest changes they made between the Japanese and the American. Here they used, for the United States, they introduced 4 different characters to explain why why he had a feminine side. And finally, they basically lost interest in disguising it and introduced his sister, Malalatraz. And let's see. And the character was originally introduced in episode 102, but we only got 85 episodes. Next slide, please. Again, 85 episodes were used for broadcast in the United States, and the characters were added, 7's Arc 7, and because the runtime didn't hit the 22 minutes we needed. So they would add all of these things. They added One Rover 1, they added 7's Arc 7, and then finally added Susan, who was running the outpost on Pluto, the first, you know what I mean, the outpost on Pluto that was early warning system. They had lots of really great voice actors, Casey Kasem and Ron Michelle, and as they got farther and farther, with every other adaptation, they had better actors and better voice actors, so there's a ton of them. Let's see. There was a movie that was supposed to be released back in the day, but that actually didn't happen. And then they actually did release a live action movie. I thought I had it. About 2 or 3 years ago, 2016, 2017, which was actually pretty good. Saban finally got Filmation lost the rights, or Sandy Frank Ross lost the rights, and then Saban picked them up and started re-releasing them and remaking them as the Eagle Riders, and there's been comic books released and everything like that. And I know you said 5 minutes, so I'm gonna wrap it up now. But that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're running out of time. There was other movies and TV shows we wanted to cover, but I'll just mention them really quick. I worked on a lot on the Blackhole, but we're running out of time. I'll just mention that it was Disney's first PG film and first serious attempt on science fiction. It didn't do very well in the box office, but it's a cult classic. It's cheesy, but it's a fun movie. If you have not seen that, I recommend to watch it. And I was gonna cover Moonraker. So in 1977, the Bond film was Spy Who Loved Me. And if you ever see at the very end credits, Spy Who Loved Me, it says James Bond will return and for your eyes only. Well, then Star Wars happened, and so James Bond actually got affected.